Hello and welcome to the I3 lecture series hosted by the Masters in Digital Photography Department at the School of Visual Arts. We are thrilled to have Gabriela Herman as tonight's guest speaker. Originally from Boston, Gabriela graduated from Wesleyan University in 2003 with a degree in psychology. Time spent traveling and living abroad in Mexico, France, and Brazil, and participating in experiences outside of her comfort zone have all shaped her photography. Her work focuses on travel, lifestyle, food, and portraiture. Clients include Conde Nast Traveler, Cosmopolitan Magazine, Martha Stewart Living, Travel and Leisure, Monocle, Airbnb, and Google, among others. Her personal projects have been featured in publications such as Wired, The Atlantic, Esquire, and American Photography, 30 and 31. She was named a Critical Mass Top 50 finalist and a top emerging photographer by the Magenta Foundation. So please help me welcome Gabriela to our lecture series.
Hey guys. Hey, good evening. Thank you so much, Jaime, and thank you, SVA, for hosting me here. I just want to say this is really cool because I have come to these lectures throughout the years and have sat in this audience and listened to some of my favorite photographers talk about their work. And so it's just really grateful, and I'm humbled that I am here standing right now talking in front of you guys about my work. I did a run through of this yesterday with my sister, and she said that Hermans talk really fast. And I can tell right now that I'm doing that, so I'm going to try to slow down, so bear with me. Sometimes I just get like really excited, so I'm going to try to keep it slow. You're doing great. So this is sort of an overview of the work I'm doing right now. To give you a brief history, I started out doing photography in high school and college, black and white, darkroom, and then I moved to Brazil after college. My mom is Brazilian, and I had studied abroad there, so I lived in Sao Paulo for 5 years, and it was there that I started working for a photographer. He happened to be sort of the top photographer in Brazil, and it was awesome, and that was my first sort of foray into the professional world of like a working photographer. Then I moved back to New York in 2007, and I've been hustling as a freelancer ever since. In the beginning, I definitely, so I always shoot personal work, but in order to pay rent and stuff, I was shooting lots of events and weddings and was assisting to get by. But now I consider myself a commercial and editorial photographer. Again, always shooting for myself and personal projects happening in the background of all that. So the focus of my talk today is going to be sort of on my editorial work because that's the bulk of what I'm shooting these days. And this here is just a sampling of some of my published work. So I'm going to back up and kind of talk about how I got to this place here. It all begins at this farm on the island of Martha's Vineyard called Beetlebung, where I grew up spending a lot of my summers. And I really have this guy to thank for getting my career off the ground. So this is Chris Fisher. He's a 12th generation islander. For those of you who don't know, Martha's Vineyard is a really small island off the coast of Boston. So he grew up there, and before I met Chris, I knew him from childhood, but before I started shooting with him, I definitely considered myself a portrait photographer. I loved people and interaction, and the idea of shooting something like food seemed kind of boring to me, or sort of in the studio with fake things and tools, and I was not interested in that. But I started hanging out with Chris, and I was just enthralled by his world of farming and slaughtering and cooking. He was also doing sort of these dinners on the farm inside the greenhouse, which was kind of, back then was still a new thing. Now it's kind of overdone. But in general, I was just sort of, his approach to everything was unlike anything I had seen, and was just fascinated by it, and just kind of hung out whenever I could and shot as much as possible. So after a couple summers, I had this body of work, and I decided to put it together in a PDF. This was the actual cover of the PDF, and I had narrowed it down to about 30 images, and I sent this around to family and friends, people who knew Chris, people who knew the farm, not at all in any way as like a marketing tool, but just because I wanted to show people what I had been up to. And I sent this, to a bunch of people who sent it to their friends, who sent it to their friends, and it got forwarded around. People liked it, and it somehow landed in the email box of someone at Martha Stewart magazine. So I was in California, about to attend a conference, and I get a call on my phone, an unknown number, and I pick it up. And the woman says, hi, this is Jen Miller. I'm the director of photography at Martha Stewart. We have an assignment. It's in 2 days. We never shoot like this so last minute, but like, are you available and are you interested? And of course I said, yes. I had just gotten to California for this conference. I didn't have any equipment with me. But there was, of course, I wasn't going to turn this down. And I got on a red eye that night and landed here. So this is John Bunker. He's one of the top homologists in the country, which is someone who studies the origin and species of apples at his apple orchard up in Maine. And the assignment was to sort of hang out with him on his farm and capture what he was doing there. And so you'll see in these images sort of a similarity to the kind of work that I was doing at Beetlebung, and that in that it's sort of also a small sort of family-operated farm. And I was sent here for 3 luxurious days. Like these days with editorial work, it's rare to have sort of that much time at one place with the subjects. So I'm very grateful that I had that, and I'm really happy with these images. And there was a limited shot list. They didn't give sort of like, we need a picture of like this apple here. It's just kind of, generally we need pictures in the orchard and of making pie, kind of that thing. So I just kind of wandered around and shot everything that they were doing and things that were interesting to me, like this boot hall of fame that was in the barn I thought was cool. And I was shooting from sunrise to sunset and just spending time with people on the farm. This is a side story, but he has these posters around town, and people show up to his house with apples that they've found, and I was there for this, and he cuts them up and tastes them and like tells them exactly where they're from and what their origin is. It was like mind-boggling. So these are my favorite kinds of shoots, and really I think this story established my style as it's known today with sort of editorial work. And that's sort of using lots of natural light and not super overly produced, and shooting a mix of landscapes and portraiture and food, sort of the whole shebang in order to tell a story. This is what actually ran in the magazine. Also, it was a luxurious 10 pages with very focused just on the photography. And if you think back to the PDF that I had sent with the Beetlebung work, you can kind of see how this translated to this assignment. The story ran. It was a success. They loved it. I loved it. I was kind of hooked. I was getting paid to do what I love in the style that I love. But I had yet, this is sort of, they sent me out there, and I hadn't met anyone at the magazine. And I will talk about this later, but it's all about building relationships in terms of getting work. So after this ran, they called me in for a meeting, and I got to actually meet in person some of the people at Martha Stewart. But at the time, I may have had a portfolio, or I'm not sure, but it wasn't a portfolio that was appropriate for Martha Stewart. It was probably just sort of portraits. So I wanted to bring something to the meeting, and I ended up making this box. I just found this like tin box at a flea market and sort of retrofitted it with this like picnicky fabric, not very well, but and I printed 50 images from the Beetlebung work and brought this into the meeting. And again, they had already seen the images from the PDF, but seeing the work presented this way in the box got them all excited about this work again, and they decided to pick this up and run it in their summer issue. So this was amazing because it was also kind of just a photo essay and just, I think, a beautiful layout, still one of my favorite layouts, really focusing on the images. And from those two things sort of established my relationship with Martha Stewart, which I'll get to in a bit. But once this came out, I still continued shooting with Chris. Every summer, or anytime I was on the island, I would hang out and sort of go to events that he was doing. And at the time, he was also sort of taking off with his career, sort of in parallel, and getting lots of press on his own. This was a greenhouse dinner he did on the island, and I just love the guy on the right there is actually Adam Platt, who's the New York Magazine food critic who was coming in to eat some of his food. And so I started getting assignments from other publications to shoot Chris. So this was a story on him that ran in French Glamour. And this was sort of like a pinch me moment when it was like I was getting paid to shoot what I was already doing on my own. So it felt like awesome. So I continued shooting with Chris all the time, and flash forward to this summer. So after 7 years of collaborating and shooting with him, we published a cookbook that came out in June. I actually have the cookbook here, if anyone wants to look at it after. So I really count sort of the Apple story and the Martha Stewart and the Beetlebung story that came out as Martha Stewart as the start of my editorial career. That was really started to work for magazines. And I just want to emphasize here how shooting the personal work with Beetlebung stuff led to that assignment work. And I'm going to talk about that again and again, just about personal work, how awesome it is to do it. And I actually just read a quote on Facebook yesterday from a photographer who happened to be, this is random, but my first assignment for Time Out, he was the photo editor. But he posted on Facebook yesterday, don't trust anyone who doesn't do personal projects. So I support that 100%. At this point, I was no means like working steady all the time, but I was finally getting the work that I wanted to be shooting, that being hot farmers. Many hot farmers came after the Martha Stewart piece. That's in France. Just a gaggle. This is upstate New York for Monocle. And this is a gorgeous couple and family that I shot in Seattle. They're farmer florists, which means they grow their own flowers and then also make all the arrangements. And this was shot for Martha Stewart. So Martha Stewart, after the Beetlebung, I started shooting for them regularly. They're right now probably my most steady client. I've shot maybe over 20 feature stories for them. So I brought here just a couple of my favorite assignments that I've done with them. This is continuing from that farmer florist in Seattle. This is a woman who grows lavender on the coast of Virginia, and then I photographed her the process. She turns it into soap and also makes brittle. This was a story about a couple in Washington who they transport rare plant species from Asia and then bring them to their nursery and grow them and sell them. And also, I want to note that while this looks like this was shot in studio, I almost never shoot in studio, and this is actually in the greenhouse, and the assistant and the editor and I are both are all holding like a piece of fabric like behind the plant to shoot something like this. This is an herb garden that I shot in Nova Scotia. This woman grows all these herbs and then makes jams and jellies out of them. Of course, I wasn't only shooting for Martha Stewart. I started getting other work. Having published work kind of leads to more work. This is assignment for Town and Country. And I started shooting regularly for Conde Nast Traveler. I've always traveled and shot when I've been traveling and lived abroad and speak a bunch of languages. So like shooting for Martha, shooting for Conde Nast Traveler has been a really great fit for me and coincides with my style a lot. And I love working for them. This is a story I shot for them in Hawaii. This is a story in West Texas. And this is in Maine. I also shoot a lot for the Travel Channel now. This was a fun assignment at Sturgis. For those of you guys who don't know Sturgis, like I had never heard of it, it's a motorcycle rally that happens in South Dakota every summer. They just celebrated their 75th anniversary this summer. And this is sort of an example that how photography can take me to places that I never thought I would be and let me explore things that I would never dreamed of being at Sturgis, but having access to something like this and actually enjoying it is awesome. This is in the south of France. It's a story for a Far magazine that was about scent and memory and your ties to place via scents and memory. So we were shooting all of like the jasmine fields in the south of France in a town called Grasse, which is the perfume capital of the world. So when I tell people that I'm a travel photographer, they always ask, what's the best place you've ever been assigned to go? This place. This was a story also for Traveler in the Greek islands that I shot last summer around this time. And it was just how you imagine, like sort of like, you know, white walls, everything, and, you know, deep blue water. And what I love shooting about travel, sort of back to the Apple story too, is that it allows you, or it actually necessitates you to shoot a range of images. So, you know, in a travel story, you have to have landscapes and food and portraits and interiors. And their travel shoots, everyone's like, oh, that's so amazing, you know, like everyone's so jealous, but they're so much work, they're exhausting. You know, you're getting up sunrise to sunset and not stopping the entire day for multiple days. This was actually the second day on the Greece shoot, and I actually broke my toe, so did the rest of the shoot on crutches and out of the car. But it's also rewarding and it pays off, and this landed me my first sort of big national magazine cover. And this totally was a dream assignment. And it didn't just happen like that. It obviously took a while to get to this, and I hope to be shooting more covers in the future. But I'm going to talk a little bit now about sort of exactly how I went about getting these jobs. So getting the job. When people ask me advice on, you know, how do you get work, I always say you have to come about it from all angles, you know, every avenue that you can to try to get the work. So what does that mean? It's everything from, you know, keeping your website up to date, keeping a steady or a contact list that's up to date as well and organized, sending out promos. It can be physical promos. I brought a sample here of like some physical promos, and there's some there that you guys can take. So postcards, booklets, posters, email promos. That's, you know, everything from like newsletters to just simply emailing photo editors with new work, social media stuff, Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, Instagram. I'm on all of that. I could talk on and on about sort of each of these things. It's probably a whole other lecture. But what I'm going to do is sort of show you how doing one of those things actually led to a specific job. So you can see sort of the trail from that. It's rare that you can actually kind of trace it, but I have some examples here where you can see that. So the number one advice when people ask me, I say, is be social. I can't emphasize this enough. It means like everything. So when I say social, like networking, going to events, openings, attending festivals and conferences, everything that you can to meet people who are in hiring positions. And I would say also to that's not just in the photo world, but just generally advice, it's good to be social outside of the photo world as well. You know, I get random jobs sometimes because I happen to be the only photographer that person knows, and it might not even be relevant to what I shoot, but they happen to know me because I'm out and about, and you can get work that way. Okay, so the first example I have here is with Travel and Leisure. I've never been able to get a meeting with them. I've been emailing photo editors for years, never heard back, and I was at a networking event at a bar in the city here, and I ended up meeting and having a drink with a photo editor from Travel and Leisure. The next week, I was on a plane to Bermuda shooting for them. So that's not always the case. That was obviously super fast, like meet one, you know, this night and get the call the next day. So it's kind of rare that happens so quickly. Usually it's more about playing the long game. So it's about building relationships over time, and again, meeting people whenever possible, but not just meeting them, but keeping up with them. So that's staying in touch, sending news, you know, social media, following editors as they move from magazine to magazine, which they all do. So that's what I mean by updating the contact list, always having the current sort of who the photo is where. And you know, you don't need something fancy like agency access for that. You literally can just go to a magazine stand or bookstore and sort of see in the roster who the photo editor is. Every magazine I read, that's the first page I usually go to and kind of see if I recognize the name or who is it. Also, with junior editors, like pay attention to junior editors because they'll eventually be senior editors and photo directors and go on to other places. So building relationships. Okay, so this example is about a woman named Heidi Volpe, who freelances as a photo editor here and there. She gives lectures and works on special projects. She also helps out with the blog A Photo Editor, which if you haven't read or don't read yet, you really should. It's a great online blog that talks about industry stuff. And so I've always been sending her all of my materials. And she's not in a hiring position, meaning she doesn't work at a magazine or at an ad agency, but I really just, I know that she was connected in the industry, and I respect her opinion. And whenever I sent stuff, she actually wrote me back, and that's very rare. So this is a promo that I sent out 2 years ago. I have a bunch of them here, so you guys can take them. It's a poster, and I sent it out in spring, so I decided to tie in the food and farming vibe with the springtime. And so instead of just sending, prior to this, I kind of had always just sent out postcards. But for this, I knew I wanted to do sort of more of a promo piece and not just postcards. So I ordered some seeds and got some envelopes and had these custom rubber stamps made for these seed packets. And inside, it got mailed in a clear envelope, and inside the poster I had another postcard with a different image and a handwritten note. So I got off the phone with Heidi yesterday, and I mentioned to her that I was going to talk about her in this talk, and she brought up this promo, and she says that she has these seed packets on her shelf, and she looks at them all the time, and that she really appreciated how there was a personal note to it. And she said in all my promos how she really appreciated how I always would say, Heidi, her name, and I wouldn't just send out a blast of to anonymous people. And that she could tell from the promos that I sent through the years a little bit about my personality. She said that I always seemed really excited and that I used lots of exclamation points all the time. And so even though we had never met, she told me when she received my promos, she felt we're friends, and she's catching me up. So this summer, she was working on a project that involved tourism in Santa Barbara, and she needed to hire a photographer. And she immediately thought of me, having known what my work was and the style through the years, and knowing what the client was looking for. And so she thought of me, but not only that, but she also, having sort of gotten a sense of who I was through my promos, and I'm quoting this, which she said on the phone yesterday. She said, "Oh, I could spend time with this person and it would be okay," because she was going to have to be on set with this photographer, me, for the shoot. So last month I ended up going to Santa Barbara with her. This hasn't been published, and these aren't edited, but I just pulled a couple of the images from that project to show you. And this is just kind of showing how sort of the long game pays off. So that was maybe 5+ years of sending her material, knowing that she wasn't in a position to hire, but all of a sudden here she was, and I got the job. And it was a perfect assignment that was tailored for the kind of work that I do. And we had a really good time, and I consider her a friend. And we were talking on the phone yesterday because she wants to shoot some spa in Arizona together with me. So that would be awesome. So the first example was sort of being social and then playing the long game. Sometimes you gotta double down. There's a photo editor who I've been sending my stuff to for years. Send her physical promos, emails, probably friended her. I never once ever heard back from her. And I was at another sort of social event in the city, and we're in a group setting, and she came up, we were talking, and she introduced herself, and she said, "Hi, I'm Jessie Adler." I said, "Jessie Adler, I'm Gabriela Herman. I've probably been sending you stuff for so many years." And she was like, "Gabriela Herman, oh my God, I love you. I love your work." And that was so crazy to me that I had never heard from her, yet she knew who I was and loved my work. And last week, I was in San Juan shooting for her for this assignment. So that was just so that was the combination of actually meeting in person, but also having followed through the years, and it paying off. Okay, so the last example is sort of about timing, and it's going to lead up to my favorite assignment ever, which I'm excited to talk about. But it starts right here with a story from Martha Stewart. This was at the Kutztown Folk Festival in Pennsylvania. It's just sort of a small town folk festival. And There really wasn't that much on the shot list. Again, it was sort of walking around for the day, shooting what I thought was interesting. It was 100 degrees. It was so hot that they were selling at the festival these like ice pack neck things that you like put around your neck to walk around because it was so hot. Again, just sort of shooting things that were of interest. This wasn't like a big story for Martha Stewart. It was going to run, it ran in print just one page, and then it was sort of a longer online slideshow. But Martha shoots everything a year in advance, so I shot that the summer of 2012. And then a year later, when it came out, it was 2013, I added it here in a newsletter that I sent out. So I send out newsletters a few times a year. It's not on any sort of schedule, but it's sort of when I have news. And I use MailChimp. There's lots of companies that have great platforms. I usually start off with something that has come out recently published. So this was a piece that I did for Travel and Leisure. The newsletter is actually sort of scrolling. These are just screenshots, so it looks a little weird here. But this was an assignment for Architectural Digest that was published. I was in an upcoming show, so I wanted to let people know about that. And I always like to sort of end the newsletter with a personal image, so that the bottom image there was from a vacation in Missouri. And as you can see here, I included the work about the Kutztown Folk Festival. So I sent out the newsletter in the morning, and it landed in the inbox of a photo editor at Cosmopolitan. I had never shot for them before, but I had been sending them stuff throughout the years. And that morning, the photo editor who opened up this newsletter was looking to assign a photographer for a story that she was working on about rodeo queens. And this was going to be a 3-part assignment, where I was going to be following around Miss Rodeo Oregon, who is this woman here, Nicole Schrock, on her quest to become Miss Rodeo America. So this is my favorite assignment ever. I've never gotten an assignment that's even close to what this one is, but I hope to again in the future. So the first part of this assignment was going to be going to a small town, to her small town in Oregon and hanging out with her family and her farm and going to the local rodeo. So when that editor got my newsletter that morning with the Kutztown work, which she probably opened up, I have a link to like everything from the newsletter. She thought like, oh, like Gab would be great for this story. Like I obviously had never shot rodeo queens or sports or I knew nothing about rodeo queens, but because I had that sort of small town vibe work from the Kutztown Festival, this is how I got this job. So this scenario sort of, I was lucky with the timing that like that day that I sent the newsletter that she was looking for a photographer, but it's just sort of showing how sending the newsletters also pays off in the long run. So I'm going to talk about this project a little bit now. Whereas the Beetlebung project started off as personal work that sort of led to assignment work. This assignment here or project is sort of an assignment. What started off as an assignment that ended up kind of being about more personal work. So I was following around Nicole, as I said, learning so much about rodeo queens, and it's all about curlers and hairspray, so much of it. And I was with a writer, and we were together going out to follow Nicole. So we did 3 week-long trips out west. So Nicole was a state queen of Oregon and was like trying to be Miss Rodeo America. Before I got the assignment, of course, I like didn't know about rodeo queens that they even existed. And so the second trip was going around with a gaggle of rodeo queens around Oregon. Nicole had hosted 5 of her friends, because throughout the year of queening, which is actually a verb, they all meet up. They kind of like pause school or work, and for the year that they're the state queens, they meet up at the big rodeos around the country. And so they all get to know each other. So she invited like 5 of her friends to come out to Oregon and I basically went on vacation with 5 rodeo queens for a week that November. And we went to the beach, we visited a cheese factory, we went to a lumber yard, and it's pretty crazy because sometimes they're dressed down, but other times they're like in their full rodeo wear. And so like, crossing the street with like 6 rodeo queens, you definitely get a lot of stares. So the second part of the trip ended with a visit to Pendleton for the Pendleton Rodeo. The Pendleton Rodeo is I don't know if it's the largest, but it's the most historic rodeo that happens in the country. And so you'll see here, you can kind of tell in this image, so it's all a grass stadium, and Pendleton, there's no advertising allowed. And a funny anecdote is that at Pendleton, all of the press have to be in rodeo wear. So I actually had a budget from Cosmo to go out and buy cowboy boots and a cowboy hat and a shirt, which was required. So this is the shot at Pendleton. I don't think that this is like the strongest image photographically speaking, but I like to leave it in the story for sort of the content, because sort of with this one image you can get a sense of what the queening world is about. This is one of my favorite images from the whole project, and this is Miss Rodeo Washington. Her name is Jessie Tennant, and she's getting ready to go to the parade at Pendleton. So the third trip, we went out to Las Vegas for the actual competition. It happens during Rodeo Week in Las Vegas, which is also crazy in itself because there's just cowboys everywhere. And there's 29 states in the U.S. that had a queen representing them at the competition. And people ask me what it's like. It's very much a mixture of like an actual rodeo with like competitions on the horse and Miss America. So like there is this was, I think, was like the current events or public speaking portion, and there is a fashion component. But then there's also like they have to take a written test about the history of rodeo and like horse medication, and do like tasks like on the horse in the rodeo. So it's a whole combo of things. This is Shanae Shiner, and her boyfriend at the time, I don't know if they're still together or not, but his name is Stetson Vest, which is like amazing. And so they were kind of like rodeo royalty. She was the reigning champion in 2013, so she was sort of there at the competition to pass the torch on to the next winner, who happened to be this is Miss Rodeo Mississippi, who won. So we had started off with Nicole and was kind of following her around. Just because the writer, who's the one who pitched the story, lives in Oregon, so she picked Miss Rodeo Oregon. Having picked just a random girl for the competition, Nicole actually came in third place, which is so amazing that she made it that far. And throughout the competition, Nicole was definitely a contender. Everyone was saying that she might win, and there was a couple other people who everyone was like talking about, so I was kind of shooting extra those girls. None of them were Miss Rodeo Mississippi. I have like no photos of her. She was totally like a surprise when she won. So this is one of the few images that I have of her. And this is that right after she got queen in the backstage. And this is probably also one of my favorite images from this body of work. So I shot, those were 3 trips. It was from August to December of 2013. And the story ended up running in Cosmo that summer. This is what ran. It ended up being 6 pages and kind of more of a photo essay. So they basically ended up cutting the article that Kelly had written. Kelly had, was the one who pitched it and had done all this reporting work and had written, I don't know, 10,000, 12,000 word piece, and they ended up kind of cutting it all and turning it into this, which was fine and exciting, but I don't know if you can tell, but none of the images that ran in Cosmo were any of the ones I just showed you. So it's a very different edit than what I would have chosen. And understandably so. As for Cosmo, they have all these different restrictions and it's a totally different audience. But once this ran, Kelly and I both felt like we both had so much material. Her written word had been essentially cut, and we didn't want to just stop it there and move on. So we decided to do 2 things. We had an embargo period, but because they sort of cut all of Kelly's stuff, they made it a little less. We only had 3-month embargo period. Usually for magazines it can be 6 months or a year, but because they were aware that they had kind of screwed up and not given her sort of the platform to share her story, we only had 3 months embargo period. So after that, we decided to do two things, one of which was this printed promo, which I have a couple here. I don't have that many, but you guys can see after, if you want to come up and see it. And the purpose of this was sort of to have a like package up the project in a printed piece, but also for me to use it as promotion. So it's 16 pages, and it starts off with this introduction from Kelly. And my photos are sort of layered with the girls' quotes and captions. And I made, I think I made 200 of these and sent out maybe 100 or 150 to contacts, and save the rest for meetings and things like that. And it got some press, like sort of in the photo industry world. So PDN like wrote up about this project because of this promo, and a photo editor interviewed me about the promo as well. So that was really cool to sort of get it seen with a larger audience through that channel. And the second thing that we did was we published the story on Medium. So Medium, if you guys don't know, is a platform. It didn't really exist, or I mean, it didn't exist several years ago. It's now a place where anyone who wants to can publish a piece and get it out there, and it has really good circulation. And shout out to my husband who's here, who made us put this on Medium. He was the one who suggested it, and it was the best case scenario for this project. Medium ended up sort of putting it on their spotlight or radar thing, so it just got like exponentially more views because of that. And Kelly's the writer. She was able to sort of put out there the story, the full story that she wanted to say about rodeo queens, and I was able to put together the edit of photos that I wanted with the story. And of course, the Medium audience was also a totally different audience than the original Cosmo audience. So it's just, again, reaching more people. And this actually led to publication in another place that was really suitable for the project, which was American Cowboy. So this just ran this summer in American Cowboy as a photo essay. And I'm really happy with the layout here and the photos that they chose to run. So with the Rodeo Queens project here, you can see sort of how it started an assignment, but we kind of took it and made it into this personal project by extending it past just the original assignment. And so now, like, I'm getting commission work, and it's really great. I'm super thankful and lucky to be getting paid to do what I love. And I love assignment work and working with editors, and I hope to be doing that for a while. But one of the biggest lessons I've learned so far is sort of the value of long-term personal projects. So I just kind of want to shift a little bit and talk about that for a sec. So this is a project that I started in 2010 called Bloggers. And it's, I shot it for about 3 years, and I shot 50 people. And it was all about bloggers being lit by their computer screens. And for me, this project was important because the first real project I had that was sort of a cohesive body of work that got any real attention. So I sort of started posting these photos online, and it got picked up. I think Wired magazine might have been one of the first places to blog about it. And from that, it sort of went viral online. Obviously, due to the nature of like shooting bloggers and like what the images were, it was a very convenient project to be posted online and shared online. So I had that going for me. And then once it was online everywhere, I started entering it into competitions and started exhibiting it around the world. And I think I've probably exhibited in maybe 6 countries at this point. And the project for me was really sort of reflecting the world that I was living in at the time, back when blogs were really big. And I was blogging, I was reading tons of blogs, and I was sort of looking to bloggers as our new cultural icons and sort of tastemakers, and really wanted to sort of spotlight and highlight them with this series. I'm not going to get too much more into the blogger series, but I'm just showing you this because having this project out, it really taught me what it means to create a body of work. And how to talk about it and put it out in the world. So that's bringing me to the last project that I'm going to share with you here, called The Kids. So in the same way that the bloggers was sort of a personal reflection of documenting the world that I live in, so is this project, but in a much more personal way, and I think more impactful in its message. So I'll talk to you about this project and then show you sort of how it led to publication and what's happening with it now. So my mom came out as gay when I was in high school. It was a very difficult time for me. I hardly spoke to her for a year, and I never talked about it with anyone. It wasn't until I was 29 that I could actually sort of say the words out loud, like, my mom is gay. And I had never before met anyone else who had a gay parent. So the idea for this project was to find other people like me, and so I shot children, adult children, so I kind of made it in college or older, who were raised by a gay parent or had a parent come out. And for me, this project was really personal for so many reasons, but it was a way through photography that I was able to meet other people who shared my same experience. And it really started off with this woman here, Danielle, who's awesome. I had the idea to do the project, but I didn't know how to start it because I didn't know anyone, and I sort of mentioned it to my sister, who was living in San Francisco at the time, and she knew about this organization called Collage, and she connected me with Danielle, who was running the New York City chapter of Collage. Collage is the only national nonprofit organization that supports kids who have a gay parent. It stands for Children of Lesbian and Gays Everywhere. So I was trying to meet with Danielle, and we couldn't meet up for coffee, and she was like, oh, why don't you just come to my house? I'm having a meeting. So I show up at her house, and there she was in a room with about 8 or 9 people, and they all went around and introduced themselves, and they all had gay parents. I had never met anyone, and all of a sudden I'm in a room of 9 people, and they all have gay parents, and like they're like talking about it like out loud. And for me, that was like, whoa, like I need to do this project. Like that, it was happening. So Danielle, just to give you her story a bit, not only she's amazing, she works with refugees, but she lives here in Brooklyn, but was raised in DC by 6 parents. So she had 2 moms, 2 lesbian couple, 2 dads, a gay couple, and they split up when the gay couple split up when she was 2, I think, and both got new partners. So she has 4 dads and 2 moms. And she does a lot of advocacy work for Collage and media outreach on behalf of kids who have gay parents. This is Jamie. She was in the room that day and was one of the first people I shot. She was raised in Chicago by her lesbian mom and her mom's various partners. This is Elizabeth. She was raised in Boston by her mom and dad, and her dad came out when she was in college. For each subject, not only shooting portraits, but I also interviewed them. I knew that I wanted to have sort of an audio component to the project. So I have a quote here from Elizabeth that I'll just read. So she's saying this. He said, "It's time for me to confront my identity." And I asked, "Are you gay?" And he says, "Well, I haven't had any experience to be sure." And I think the next words out of my mouth were, "Dad, I'm pretty sure you're gay." This is Aaron. He was raised in Berkeley, California by 2 moms. And his moms split up when he was 7. And then one of his moms married a man, so was also raised by his stepfather. This is Hope, who was raised in New York City by her 2 dads. She was one of the last people I shot for the project. I shot her this spring. I'm still shooting the project, but out of the 40 people I've shot up until that point, she's actually the only person who was raised by 2 dads. So I was really glad to meet her and be able to shoot her because I felt like that's an important part of the dynamic to be included in the project. And she's awesome as well. This is Moshe, who was raised in upstate New York by his 2 moms. I think he was the youngest person I shot. This is Lauren, who's raised in Kansas City, Missouri by her mom and dad, and her dad came out when she was 7. I think up until Lauren, I kind of just had been shooting people in New York and people who'd recommended me, or someone would say, oh, you should shoot so-and-so. But Lauren was the first person that I sort of traveled to shoot. And I'm so glad I did. And of course, I've shot now people from across the country, but she was the first one that was sort of I shot outside of New York. And with each photo shoot and interview, I kind of say that they're my own versions of therapy, that each session is like a therapy session, because for the first time I'm meeting people, but I'm also hearing them talk about what it was like, and just saying things that I feel like I stopped recording the audio interview so many times to say, like, oh my God, like I felt like that too, or you did that, I did that too. And so it was really therapeutic for me, this whole project. This is Mark. He was raised in Pennsylvania by his mom and his dad. And his dad came out when he was in college. Mark is gay himself, and they kind of were coming out or at the same time, but didn't know it, which is an interesting dynamic. This is Zach, who was raised in Iowa by his two moms. And Zach kind of became internet famous for a brief moment. He was the guy who spoke in front of the Iowa State Senate about his two lesbian moms in support of marriage equality. It was like a YouTube clip that was going viral. And after that, he sort of took some time off college and started doing advocacy work around the country for marriage equality, and also works a lot with the Boy Scout equality. And I think he published a book recently about growing up with his two moms. This is Diana. She was raised in upstate New York by her mom and dad, and her dad came out when she was in college. So for the images, in terms of how I shot them, I very much knew that I wanted just the person in the frame. I didn't want it to be like a family shot. This was really about the children and their stories. So I knew it was just going to be them in the frame. And I knew I was going to do everything natural light, just because that was easier, and I shoot, obviously, the natural light. But going into each shoot, I also sort of had a sort of paragraph that I would send to the subjects telling them about it, and having them think about the moment that that their parent came out. So if they had a parent come out, there's obviously that moment when you find out, which is super memorable, at least in my case. Or if you were raised by gay parents from birth, then you have sort of, I asked them to think about like an important conversation they had, or if there was like the moment they realized their family was kind of different, and to use that moment and that thought as a trigger for the photos. So for instance, Jamie, who's the first one, she had this really important conversation with her mom in the car on a road trip, so that's why I shot her in the car. Diana here, this is a shirt that she wore all throughout I think the year that her dad came out, and which was a really difficult time, and so she had saved this shirt, and so she brought the shirt out for the photo shoot. Not every single image is it like that specific a thing, but I always just ask the subject to think about that when I go into the shoot. So this is my sister. She was raised in Boston. We were raised in Boston, and our mom came out when she was 13. And I have yet to interview her. I know I need to, and someday I will, but it's still sort of a conversation that we've never had, so it's kind of hard to have. So that's TBD. And I know that I need to shoot. I would like to shoot myself for this project, and I know I need to do that, but I haven't done that yet. And I don't know why, if it's just like I haven't, or if there's another reason why I haven't done that. But eventually, I would like to include myself in the project. So this is over the course of 4 years, and I knew based on my experience with the blogger series that sort of went viral online before I had a chance to package it up, that for this project I really wanted to make sure that it was ready before I started, releasing it. So I didn't post it over 4 years. I never posted it like on my website or blog. Maybe one time I included it in a newsletter, like trying to ask for subjects, but I sort of kept it under wraps. And I wanted to be ready, and I knew that I also wanted it to be, to sort of make its debut, hopefully in print somewhere. So my dream place to have it be in print would have been the New York Times Magazine, which I'm obsessed with, that I read, every week cover to cover. And it still is a dream. I've never shot for them. I would love to shoot for them someday. I reached out to them early on because I've been in touch with the photo editors over the years there, way before the project was ready, and they kind of were like, oh, we're not interested, and I was devastated, but what can you do? So now that the project is ready, I wanted to sort of go back again and reach out to some magazines. So this project was always happening in the background, like while I was shooting and traveling for the editorial work, and alongside the Beetle Bong. And I knew at some point I was going to have to sort of get it out there, and I was just kind of dragging along, and would forget about it for months at a time. And then this spring, when the Supreme Court case was coming up on marriage equality, I just knew, like, okay, now's the time. I have to get ready. Like, this needs to be like packaged up and like get it out there. So I had shot enough people that I felt like I could narrow it down to like a strong edit. I had the audio portion was really tricky because I'd never done audio before and I didn't really know what I was doing. I recorded everything on my iPhone and sort of edited it in GarageBand, so that took a really long time. But I really knew I wanted the audio to be a part of the project, especially something like this that is so personal, that really you want to be able to hear the subjects talking about their stories in their own voices. So I finished editing the audio, and then I need to build a website for it, which also took some time. But this is sort of a screenshot of the website, so you can see. So you scroll like vertically to see all the subjects, and you can see here it starts off with sort of a large image. There's a caption. So here it says Dory, raised in New Jersey by her dad and mom, who came out when she was 8. There's a quote there, and then there's an audio clip there. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but...
My mom is lesbian. I was conceived in a heterosexual marriage. My parents divorced when they separated when I was 6, around the same time. When I was like 8, my mom's partner at the time we moved in, but it wasn't like explained to me.
I'm not going to play the whole thing, but just so you get a sense of like, how you can experience the website. So every time, once the website was ready, every time I went to a meeting, which I'm always trying to do, but it's really hard to get meetings, but when you get them, you want to bring as much work as possible. So I'd bring my portfolio, but I'd also bring the iPad and say, hey, can I show you this personal project that I'm working on? And sort of ask editors for advice, like, what they thought of it, and if they had ideas of like who else I should pitch it to. So eventually I was in talks with a couple magazines who were interested in it, and it dragged along, and nothing ended up panning out. So when I had first reached out to the New York Times Magazine years ago, they had given me the email address, or I had the email address, or someone had looked at from the the guy who was the photo editor for the Sunday Review section had seen the link and was interested in the project, but said, come back to me when it's ready. So after the magazines that I reached out to sort of turned down, I was like, okay, I'm going back to the New York Times. So I took him with this project. I went to him with this project that was sort of now fully packaged and pitched it in the context of the Supreme Court ruling that was coming out on marriage equality. And this time the timing was right, and he liked the work. And so this is what ran this June in the New York Times Sunday Review. And this was the best case scenario because it actually made me have to sit down, and they wanted me to write a personal essay. So it was the first time that I had to sort of write my story and get it out there. And it was really scary to do and really hard, but I had some good editors, and I'm really proud of what I wrote. And it's weird to, like, having started off from a place that I wasn't able to even say the words out loud, to now basically like screaming it to the world, to like the widest audience possible. So this ran in print, and then online it was also a slideshow with a longer text and had about 15 images in the slideshow. So once that came out, I started getting contacted from other publications, one of which was the Observer magazine, which is The Guardian's sort of weekly magazine. And in this scenario, whereas the New York Times, sort of I wrote my sort of story the way I wanted to tell it. Here, I had a writer came over and he interviewed me for the project, and it was such a different experience because you have no idea when what a writer's angle is, or what they're going to write about. So this is what ran. He ended up running the portraits from the project, but the text was pretty much all about me and my story and my family, and it was very much a shock to read. I think I cried for the first 3 hours the morning it came out, just because I wasn't sure what he was going to say, and he wrote some things that I did say, but not that I regret saying them, but I was very vulnerable. But ultimately, I'm just glad that I did say those things, and now it was out there, and maybe it would inspire others to share things as well. So this got it's getting picked up still by various publications. This is just some of the other outlets that have ran this story. I was actually on the phone this morning with Slate magazine. They were interviewing me about this. That's going to come out next week. So getting contacted by lots of other publications who want to feature it. But I was also getting emails like this. I'm not going to read it, but you guys can skim it. So all of a sudden I was getting emails from other kids from all corners of the globe. And getting emails like this is really the reason why I did this project. Knowing that there are other people out there who may feel a little less alone, having heard my story and the stories of the other kids, especially these are sort of people and stories that not many people have heard from before. So it's sort of through the power of photography that, like, especially with this project, like, I know that I'm making a difference. I'm contributing to a conversation and making an impact. And that is why I love what I do. And that is all.
Thank you, Gabriela, for that amazing overview of recent projects. I thought there were some really inspiring images and also some very smart, great insights into your career and your way of working. We have time for a Q&A. I'll pass around the mic. It doesn't make your voice louder, but it's necessary for the video, so please use it.
That was such a beautiful presentation, seriously. Like, that was one of the top, for real. But especially from last week, that was the top, definitely. But basically, what are the exclusivity rights of how they pass around your articles from all these different publications? And how are you able to actually, is that like by contract, or are they?
For the magazine work?
Yeah, so like basically when you first did the kids, and also the one for Cosmopolitan is what I'm really targeting.
So generally, with a magazine assignment, you have to sign a contract, and so it lists out, and it's not usually that negotiable. Like, especially places like Conde Nast or Hearst, like they have like, this is our contract, and you can't really budget. But it's set in the contract that there's an embargo period. Usually it's like 6 months. So what that means is once it's published. So a lot of stuff I shoot like a year in advance, and I'm not allowed to share that with anyone until it's published. So as soon as it's published, then I can post it on Facebook and Instagram and my website. And then once it's published, after 6 months, if that's the embargo period, I can't do, up until 6 months, I can't do anything else with the images other than my own personal like website kind of stuff. But after 6 months, then I can do whatever I want with the images. I still own all the rights. So, resell to other magazines, sell it to a stock agency, or, whatever you want to do, you're allowed to.
Hi, thank you for sharing. I just want to ask you, you were pitching your postcards, your flyers, your mailers, and how long was the response time? You spoke about.
I would say you very rarely get any response. If you get if you get like 2 emails back, like let's say, you sent out 200 postcards and you get 2 emails back, like that's like, woohoo, like I got 2 emails. Like, it's very rare that you get a response, especially with a physical promo. With an email promo, like an editor's, it's easier for them to just like hit reply and be like, thanks for sending, great work. But with a physical promo, like then they have to like pull up the email, find your email address, and like send you an email. So with a physical thing, it's very rare to actually get a response. But I hope what I showed you is that it's always worth doing that, because in the long run, it will hopefully pay off. I hope that answers the question.
An extension of that question, how often do you send out the printed promos as opposed to, let's say, your newsletter, the email?
So I don't have any regular schedule. I think if I was better about it and had more time, I would have more sort of like in my calendar a couple times a year, like I need to send out a promo here, here, and here. But what happens with me, my work is sort of seasonal. So I work a ton in the summer months and the fall, and then it kind of slows down in the winter. So when things are kind of slow and I'm not traveling a ton is when I usually try to send out a promo. Ideally, I would like to do something once a year, like a big thing, sort of like this or the poster, like once a year. But then maybe 2 times in addition to that, sending out just postcards. They're just sort of general reminders to people in hiring positions, like, hey, I'm out here and I'm working.
Hi, thank you for the great presentation. Quick question. You chose color as opposed to black and white. Is that a reason for that, or?
No, so I started off, shooting and developing black and white all throughout college. But when I was in Brazil and I got my first digital camera there, I sort of quickly transitioned to digital. And when I switched from film to digital, I kind of just went into. I had taken color photography classes as well, but with the digital, it just sort of translated to color work. And there's not a particular reason, but I obviously, I don't know if you can tell, but like I enjoy like really bright, vibrant, poppy colors, and I think that's become the sort of a signature style of my work is that bright color. So I actually shot a personal project this summer that I'm debating whether to put it in black and white or not. I haven't decided.
Anybody else? Gabriela, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for having me.